So this is the painting, and it's based off a reference photo that I took on my trip to Thailand last year. So let's get started. I'm gonna tape off this piece of paper with some thin masking tape. Not because I need to fix it to my surface. This is a watercolor block, so it won't buckle, but I just like to clean edges at the end when the tape comes off. Going to mark out my rule of thirds grid, and I'm just going to eyeball it at first and then see if I got it. Not quite. Just going to adjust that mark there and see if that's about right. Yeah, good enough. I just need a rough guideline, and on the shorter side I'm not even going to measure it. It's not quite right, but good enough. I just need to have an indication of where my rules of thirds are. I'm going to place the horizon line, and I'm going to put it just above the 1/3 line. It's about the golden ratio, I would imagine, which is a good way to divide up your page. And then I'm going to draw the biggest shape, which is that massive cluster of trees there on the right hand side. And I'm sort of debating where my focal point should be. Having it on the 1/3 line on the right is where you kind of should put it, or it's a good place to put it, but that's not quite enough space for me to put that big shape in there. So I'm just going to pull it past halfway of my page, because nothing should ever really be in the center. There's always exceptions to the rules, of course, but I'm just trying to kind of find a pleasing composition here. I didn't do a thumbnail sketch for that. You'd think I'd know better by now and prepare myself before I start painting, but this seems like such a simple composition. I thought I didn't need to actually do a sketch first. And again, if this doesn't work out, well, then that was a good way to find out, to do a little study like this. But I'm obviously posting this now on YouTube, so I'm happy with the outcome for it to be shared. I mean, this isn't like a fine art piece. This literally is more like an exercise or a practice painting, but it'll teach you a few basic principles and techniques for watercolors. And I do encourage, especially if you're a bit of a beginner, to paint really simple compositions at first. Almost too easy to paint. Here are my two brushes I'm going to use for the majority of the work, which is a Chinese calligraphy brush and a Kolinsky sable brush. One for the big washes and big shapes, and then for a bit more control and detail, I use the Kolinsky sable brush. I start off with my sky mix. That's cerulean blue with a hint of ultramarine and a bit of rose. So I tip it into the red, into the purple, just to cool it off a bit. Not quite a grey, there's still plenty of blue in there, but I don't want it to be like a fully saturated blue sky. It's almost an overcast day. Enough contrast to pop out the white clouds. And you can see I'm twisting and turning my brush. That's why I like using that particular brush. And that will just give me a bit more texture and some random clouds in the sky, just by turning that brush and using different sides of it. And then I'm going to create a bit more detail in those edges. And that's why I keep the pencil lines of my clouds very, very light, because I don't always follow them. This is not a coloring in page. I just wanted to have an idea where I want my clouds to be and the size and the shape, because with clouds it's very easy to paint a repetitive pattern. Our brains wants to keep things even and same distance and same size. That makes for very boring compositions. So these clouds, you can see no two clouds are the same. It's a very irregular pattern that I'm creating. Now mixing my shadow color, same colors. I'm just varying the ratio and also dropped in a bit of burnt sienna just to warm it up a bit. Cloud shadows are usually a bit warmer. And I want it to be, different than the blue sky, because that will be very confusing. So a light gray, and then I use my smaller brush that's only got a little bit of water on it, and I'm going to soften those edges. Clouds, even when they look sharp and crisp, when you look at them closely or you zoom into a photo, you'll see that the edges aren't actually razor sharp. Everything's a bit soft. So there aren't really hard edges in clouds. They're not objects. And now I'm mixing a color for the background mountain. I want this to be purple color. That always reads as being far in the distance, or light blue or something. I deliberately let that touch the bottom of the clouds. It's nice when things merge and soften. Things in the far distance, they should be soft. They shouldn't have too hard of edges. That helps with making them look like they are far away. And I'm softening the bottom of those mountains there because I don't want any hard edges. I want everything to be quite soft in the background. And as you know, watercolor is transparent, so if I have a hard edge, and then no matter what I paint over the top, I will still see that line underneath it. Unless I use opaque paint over the top, which I rarely do. I don't have many opaque pigments. I love the transparency of watercolor, so I always try and find transparent or semi-transparent colors. And the same on that side, even though the trees are going to go over the top, you will still see hard edges underneath it if I left it just to dry without softening the bottom of those edges. There's also a bit of smoke where the big trees finish and the mountains overlap, and I want to create that misty feeling right from the beginning. That's almost going to be our focal point. Even though right at the end of the painting you will see that I'm going to change my mind about the focal point and I'm going to add some things in there that are not in the photo. So next I'm going to paint the ocean, which is very similar to the sky color because, you know, the water often or mostly reflects what's on top of it. Matching the sky color in the ocean is usually a good idea. And I've left a bit of white there for a wave breaking on the shoreline, and then just pulled a bit of a shadow underneath that. I'm mixing my raw sienna for the beach. I did pick up a little bit of that puddle that's in the bottom of my palette, just to not make it completely just raw sienna, but add a bit of variation into it. And now I'm lifting out some of the water puddles that are still on the beach. Put in a bit more of my blue color, bit of cerulean, which turns a little bit greenish because it's on top of the raw sienna, but that's okay. And then I'm going to mix a bit of a darker beach color here, because while that's wet, I can drop in a bit of variation into the beach. We don't want it to be too boring. Ultramarine and burnt sienna and a bit of raw sienna. And there we go, and just adding a bit of texture to it. There's the edge of the puddles. I might as well strengthen that a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to mix my greens, ultramarine, raw sienna, and a bit of quinacridone gold. I love quinacridone gold. If you've watched any of my previous videos, it will always be used when I try and create a green. I love the gold. I'm going to paint that distant band of trees that sits in front of the mountain, and that's why the color is a bit cooler. It's further in the distance, not as saturated. And I'm just creating a random pattern there. Same as with the clouds. Don't want to have any repetition in the size or the height of the trees. It's got to feel organic, random, which is really hard to do, to not make it a regular thing, like a picket fence. And then I'm going to lift out a little bit of the pigment just to keep that smoke rising in the distance there. And now I'm ready to mix the big green puddle for my main tree on the right. Added a bit of red, complementary to green, which will neutralize the green a bit. And this is when that calligraphy brush comes to its full potential. Great for organic textures like trees, because it just creates those random marks without me having to do too much. And I'm painting on cold press paper, which means it's quite a rough texture. So if I put my brush lightly over it, it'll create those lovely edges that look like, little leaves. I'm going to get a bit more of the yellow in. Always try and vary my colors. Never paint a big shape with just one color. A bit darker, a bit lighter, a bit warmer, a bit cooler. Pushing in one way or another just to create variations. Because they're different leaves, the shadows, the light hits it in different places. And then there's something there at the bottom of the tree, so I'm just going to leave that white and create some random marks. Doesn't matter what it is, I just wanted to have something there that looks like a barrier between the beach and the tree. And if you're ever in doubt over the colors that any of the people use that you're following, myself included, don't worry about the color. Honestly, it's about the values. Generally speaking, light and dark is way more important than if you get the right color into it. When you think about it, a black and white photograph, you can see exactly what it is. You don't need the colors to tell you what you're looking at. And the same goes for painting. I don't know, there's some pencil mark or something there that's bothering me, so I'm just going to turn that into some rocks that are extending into the ocean. I've mixed a bit more brown with burnt sienna and raw sienna, and now I'm doing a bit of dry brushing because the beach is now well and truly dry. There was only a thin layer of paint to begin with, so that dried while I was doing the bigger tree. That's the beauty of small paintings. You don't have a lot of water on the page, so things dry really quickly. And I'm just going to try and create a bit more texture in the foreground. And now mixing an even darker version of this. There's virtually no water in there, just pure pigment, ultramarine blue, and a bit of burnt sienna. And I'm just dropping in some little things that are lying on the beach, shells, I think some seeds from the trees above. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of my blue. I just want to strengthen the shadows underneath that wave there. Got a bit lost now that I've built up more texture in the foreground. And where the water meets the sand, just soften that with a bit of clean water. And that kind of looks like a wave breaking on the beach. The painting is still missing something, so I'm gonna try and add some birds to it and see if that will satisfy my artistic ambition. And again, trying to not listen to my brain that wants to paint the same shape, in the same size, in the same distance from each other. I'm having a hard time, you can tell. It does look a little bit too organized a pattern, so I'm just trying to break it up and get some randomness in there, just to create the illusion of a flock of birds. Okay, off comes the tape. And you can see why I put some tapes down. It looks much nicer with a bit of a white border around it. Put a signature on. And then I looked at it for a little while and thought, well, something's still missing. And you can see I popped in a little boat there at the top. And now I'm painting a little dog that is walking on the beach. And for that, I've picked out my very small brush. Needed a finer brush for this work because that's really tiny. There you go, a couple of legs. tail, proud little doggy, and a shadow underneath it. I've added a bit of white gouache under the trees to create the idea of, I don't know, some huts or something there, and then the boat, and then also a little person. Just a few simple marks, and now we're telling a story. Hope you give this one a try. It's a pretty simple painting, and you can obviously leave the dog and the person and the boat out to make it even more easy for you. Thanks for watching, and if you made it this far, you might as well give me a thumbs up. Thank you.